He predicted his own death to the exact day. Edgar Cayce was a photographer from Kentucky who could enter a sleep-like trance and speak with absolute precision about the human body, about energy fields invisible to science, about techniques to manipulate reality itself. Between 1901 and 1945, over 14,000 readings were transcribed verbatim. They described methods for directing energy with thought alone. And scientists are now seeing patterns in brainwave data, in biofield measurements, in quantum coherence studies that align disturbingly well with what Cayce described while unconscious. The readings weren't philosophy, they were instructions. If you're watching this, you're looking for something most people will never find. Subscribe quietly. The first secret Cayce revealed was about breath as a conductor. He said the breath doesn't just oxygenate the body, it moves energy between the physical and non-physical. In trance, he instructed patients to breathe in a specific rhythm. 3 counts in, hold for 12, release over 6. He claimed this ratio synchronized the electrical firing of the nervous system with what he called the spiritual centers along the spine. Modern research into heart rate variability has found that controlled breathing at similar ratios shifts the autonomic nervous system into coherence, a state where the heart, brain, and nervous system synchronize their electromagnetic output. Instruments at the HeartMath Institute have recorded this. The waveforms look like standing waves. Cayce said the breath was a bridge. The data suggests he wasn't speaking metaphorically. But he also said breath alone wasn't enough. You could breathe perfectly and still be energetically closed. The second secret involved visualization, but not the kind taught in self-help seminars. Cayce described visualization as energetic sculpting. He told patients to imagine light moving through the body in precise geometric shapes, spirals up the spine, figure eights around the heart, golden threads connecting the hands to distant objects. He said the mind doesn't just imagine these patterns, it generates them. Biofield imaging, using gas discharge visualization and photonic sensors, has captured faint emissions of light from human hands during focused intention. The light intensifies, the wavelength shifts. Cayce's readings described these emissions in 1923. The technology to detect them didn't exist until the 1970s. He called it the mind's true work. Then there's the contradiction. Cayce also said visualization could trap you. If you imagine energy but don't direct it outward, it coils inward and stagnates. He warned that many people who practice energy work become energetically constipated. They accumulate charge but never discharge it. The third secret was about release. He instructed patients to finish every energy practice by imagining the energy leaving the body entirely, flowing into the earth or into the air. He said the body is a channel, not a container. Neuroimaging studies on meditators show that those who practice open focus awareness, where attention expands outward rather than contracting inward, exhibit lower cortisol, reduced amygdala activation, and increased gamma wave coherence across brain regions. Cayce described this state as the flow. He said if you try to hold the energy, it will burn you from the inside. But here's where it turns. The fourth secret wasn't about controlling energy at all. It was about becoming its antenna. Cayce said the mind doesn't generate energy, it tunes into it. He described the human nervous system as a receiver for frequencies that exist independent of the body. In his readings, he spoke of vibratory fields surrounding the planet, fields that carry information, emotion, and intent. He said certain thoughts attune you to certain fields. Anger tunes you to one frequency, compassion tunes you to another, and once attuned, the field flows through you automatically. Decades later, researchers discovered the Schumann resonances, low-frequency electromagnetic waves that oscillate between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. The dominant frequency is 7.83 Hz, almost identical to the alpha brainwave state associated with relaxed awareness. Cayce called this frequency the Earth's heartbeat. He said you could sync with it intentionally, by sitting in silence and imagining your pulse matching the pulse of the ground beneath you. And then he said something no one expected. The fifth secret involved sound, but not sound you hear. Cayce described a phenomenon he called the inner tone. He said every person generates a vibrational frequency unique to their state of consciousness, a tone that exists below the threshold of hearing but can be felt. He instructed patients to sit in silence and listen inward until they could sense a hum, a vibration, a resonance inside the skull or chest. He said once you locate that tone, you can shift it. You can raise it by focusing on gratitude. You can lower it by focusing on fear. And the tone, he claimed, determines what kind of energy you attract. Cymatics research has shown that sound frequencies create geometric patterns in matter. Different frequencies produce different shapes. Cayce said the inner tone shapes the energy field around your body the same way. He called it the architecture of thought. But the contradiction deepens. Cayce also warned that most people never hear their inner tone because they're listening to the wrong frequency. The sixth secret was about silence, but not the absence of noise. He described a specific kind of silence he called the gap. It's the space between thoughts, the pause between heartbeats, the stillness between breaths. He said energy only moves through the gap. When the mind is active, energy is blocked. When the mind falls silent, energy floods through. He instructed patients to practice entering the gap deliberately by focusing on the moment just after exhaling, before the next inhale begins. That moment, he said, is a doorway. Neuroscientists studying flow states have found that the brain's default mode network, responsible for self-referential thinking, temporarily deactivates during peak performance and deep meditation. The gap Cayce described appears to be the neural signature of that deactivation. He called it touching the void. And then the final secret, the seventh, the one that reframes everything. Cayce said energy follows intent, but intent isn't what most people think it is. Intent isn't a wish or a hope. It's a command embedded in certainty. He said the mind can only direct energy when it operates from a place of absolute knowing, not believing. He described this as the difference between asking and declaring. When you ask, you're still in doubt. When you declare, the energy has no choice but to comply. He told patients to practice declaring simple truths first. I am here. I am breathing. I am alive. Then, once the mind accepts its own authority, to declare more complex truths. This pain is leaving. This energy is moving. This healing is happening. He said the body obeys the mind that speaks with certainty. Placebo research has consistently shown that belief alone can trigger measurable physiological changes. But Cayce went further. He said it wasn't belief, it was command. The mind is not a passenger in the body, it's the pilot. But here's the final turn, the one that collapses the framework. Cayce also said none of this works if you practice it for yourself alone. The eighth secret, the one he never numbered, but wove through every reading, was about reciprocity. He said energy is only sustainable when it serves something beyond the self. He described the universe as a closed, energetic circuit. What you pull in, you must give out. What you direct toward yourself, you must eventually direct toward others. He warned that people who use these techniques for personal gain or control will eventually experience what he called karmic recoil. The energy will reverse. The field will collapse inward. He said the mind's greatest power isn't in controlling energy, it's in surrendering it to a purpose larger than survival. Modern research into prosocial behavior has found that acts of generosity and compassion activate the brain's reward centers more intensely than self-serving actions. The vagus nerve, which regulates the parasympathetic nervous system, shows increased tone in people who regularly engage in caregiving. Cayce called this the upward spiral. He said you can manipulate energy all you want, but unless you release it in service, it will eventually consume you. And the contradiction that breaks it all open, Cayce himself died exhausted. After years of giving readings, after thousands of sessions directing energy for others, his body failed. He predicted the date. He told his wife he would die on January 3, 1945. He did. Some say he gave too much. Others say he completed his purpose. But the readings suggest a third interpretation. He said the body is temporary. The energy is not. He said once you learn to direct energy, you realize the body was never the point. The energy continues. The field persists. The mind that learned to command it simply steps out of the vessel and into the next frequency. He called it graduation. The recordings still exist. 14,000 transcripts. Researchers continue analyzing them. Some of the medical diagnoses he gave while asleep have been verified decades later by technologies that didn't exist in his time. Some of his instructions remain untested. And some people who follow the 7 secrets report experiences they can't explain. Sensations of heat moving through the spine, visions during breathwork, spontaneous healings, moments where the boundary between thought and reality dissolves completely. The techniques are simple, the results are not. Cayce said the mind is not confined to the brain. He said energy is not confined to the body. He said once you learn to direct one, you realize you were never separate from the other. But he also said something most people miss. In one of his final readings, He was asked, what happens to someone who masters these techniques? He said, they disappear. Not physically, energetically. They stop registering as a separate self. They become transparent to the field. They move through the world without resistance because they've stopped identifying as something the world can resist. He called it the ultimate secret. It's not about controlling energy. It's about becoming it. And once you become it, control is irrelevant. The energy simply flows. The mind simply knows. The body simply responds. And the question of whether it's real or imagined dissolves, because at that level, there's no difference. Cayce's last words were to his wife. He told her he'd seen the other side. He said it was just another frequency. He said he'd meet her there when her time came. And then he closed his eyes and stopped breathing. The monitors went flat, but people who were in the room said they felt something. A presence, a warmth, a sense that he hadn't left so much as shifted. The readings say energy never dies, it only changes form. If that's true, then everything Cayce taught is still accessible. Not in books, not in transcripts, but in the field itself. The same field he learned to read, the same field anyone can learn to read if they know how to listen. Because the seventh secret isn't really about controlling energy. It's about realizing you were never separate from it. The mind doesn't generate the field. The mind is an expression of the field. And once you see that, the techniques become unnecessary. You don't manipulate energy. You remember you are energy. You don't command the mind. You realize the mind is a frequency you've been broadcasting since before you had a body. And the question isn't whether you can control it. The question is whether you're ready to stop pretending you ever needed to. Cayce said the body is a costume. The mind is a tool. The energy is what's real. And the only thing preventing you from accessing it fully is the belief that you're something other than it. He called that belief the final illusion. He said once it falls away, everything he taught becomes obvious. Not because you've mastered the techniques, but because you've remembered what you were before you learned to forget. And at that point, the readings say, you don't need a guide anymore. You become one, not by teaching, but by existing. The field recognizes itself in you, and it responds. That's the eighth secret, the one he left unspoken, the one that only reveals itself when you stop searching for it. The transcripts are still being studied, the methods are still being tested, and somewhere, someone is sitting in silence, breathing in that specific rhythm, imagining light moving through the spine, listening for the inner tone, entering the gap, and declaring with absolute certainty that they are not separate from the energy they seek to control. And in that moment, the energy responds, not because they commanded it, but because they finally stopped resisting it. Cayce said that's when the real work begins. Not when you learn to direct energy, but when you realize there was never anything to direct, only something to become. And the field, he said, has been waiting for you to remember that since before you were born. But the final contradiction remains. If all of this is true, why did Cayce's body break? Why did the man who could see across time and space, who could diagnose illness without touching a patient, who could describe the energy field in precise detail, why did he die exhausted at 67? The readings offer no direct answer, but they suggest one. He said the body is a learning device. It's designed to break. The energy is designed to continue, and the point of mastering these techniques isn't to preserve the body. It's to realize the body was never you. The energy was. The field was. And once you know that fully, the body's collapse is irrelevant. It's just another frequency shift, another doorway, another gap to step through. Cayce said he'd see his wife again. He did. She reported dreams where he appeared, still teaching, still guiding, still speaking from the trance state. The readings say consciousness doesn't end. It migrates. And the seven secrets aren't about controlling energy in this body. They're about preparing for the transition into the next field. The one Cayce said was just a breath away. The one he said we all enter eventually. The one he claimed he could already see, even while his body was still breathing. And the last line of his final reading, transcribed on January 1st, 1945, 2 days before he died, was this. The work continues. The energy is never lost. Only the vessel changes. No one asked him to clarify. He never woke from the trance to explain. The recording ended. And 2 days later, his body stopped. But the field didn't. The readings didn't. The energy didn't. And somewhere, right now, someone is using one of his techniques, breathing in that rhythm, imagining that light, entering that gap, and feeling something move that they can't explain. And they'll wonder if it's real. And Cayce's answer, embedded in 14,000 transcripts, is always the same. Stop asking if it's real. Declare that it is, and watch what happens. He's been dead for 80 years. The techniques still work. That's the only proof that matters. But we still don't know what he saw in those final 2 days, before the body gave out, before the frequency shifted. He told his wife he was going somewhere. He didn't say where, only that it was close, closer than breath, closer than thought, and that when she was ready, she'd find him there, not as a memory, as a presence, in the field, in the gap, in the space between heartbeats where the energy moves and the mind finally goes silent, and the seventh secret stops being a technique and becomes the only thing that was ever true.